Today I will try to cover the current state of mobile ad ecosystem and forecast what's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months in terms of mobile ads. Keep in mind that everything that I will be covering today relates to game developers and publishers rather than advertisers. So always keep it in mind that it doesn't apply to advertisers. Before I start, I wanted to give you a quick background about myself and about Appodeal. So essentially, we started Appodeal because we believe that the whole mobile ad marketplace is built, it's messed up, and it's built in favor of advertisers. We come with a product to bring the balance back to the market, to get the power back to mobile app publishers. Essentially, Appodeal is a leading mediation platform. It has recently been ranked top 3 mediation platform by Joomla. It now provides access to all the major ad networks and other ad demand partners out there on the market. So it acts as a black box where you can access all the possible advertisements on the market. At this point, we serve ads to about 80 million monthly active users. We do about 7.5 billion impressions every month. And this is the number that I pulled this morning. This is the amount of apps that monetize with Appodeal. We've been on the market a little bit more than a year and a half, so it is still a relatively young company. So this is my background. Now, speaking of the trends and the actual topic of my presentation. To get started, I would like to share some good news with you. First of all, we are in a really good position because this is a conference about casual games, primarily mobile. So according to independent researchers, we can see that more and more users tend to use mobile devices rather than desktop. So we live in the mobile first world right now. And it's not just the amount of devices, of mobile devices increases, it's also about time spent in mobile. So according to KPCB, over the last couple of years, more than 50% of the time is being spent on mobile devices versus desktops. Desktops and PCs continue to be used during work hours to do work, while mobile devices, smartphones specifically, are typically used during commute, and tablets are typically used at night time. So keep that in mind when you develop your next game. There are several major trends going on right now on the mobile ads market, and I will review all of them one by one. So according to Appodeal internal stats, interstitials and banners remain accountable for the majority of ad revenues for casual games. Please keep in mind, it doesn't really apply to hardcore games because most of the hardcore games rely on in-app purchase, IAP monetization model. So it all applies primarily to casual games. So for casual games, interstitials and banners remain the main source of ad revenue stream. Not native ads, not videos, not rewarded videos. Keep that in mind. Native ads, however, is a good replacement for banners, and it will continue to grow. It will continue to attract more advertisers. It will continue to attract more brands and advertisers. And in general, it's a good alternative to banners, but it's not there yet. Keep that in mind. So rewarded videos remain a good support to hardcore projects and a good support for your IAP model. So if you rely primarily on in-app purchases, on coins, on selling like virtual currencies, then rewarded video is a good support. But it will only deliver you like 20% of your overall revenue. 80% of your overall revenue will still come from IAPs. So don't count that you make too much money on a rewarded video as a whole monetization strategy. It can be just as a support. It can be just an alternative or support to IAPs. Speaking of mediation, we see that traditional waterfalls are being replaced by flat waterfall models, or also known as auction-based mediation models, which essentially enables all the demand sources in the waterfall to compete multiple times against each other and generally access your inventory in a more efficient way. Hyperlocal targeting is growing right now, and Pokemon Go is a great proof of this statement here. As you know, they have recently launched, they have announced launch of sponsored locations, which is another way of doing hyperlocal targeting. But even if you are not making Pokemon Go, you should still be concerned about hyperlocal targeting if you care about your app monetization, because in most cases it makes sense to start passing your GPS data just to access all this brands and budgets that target hyperlocal publishers. Ad revenue attribution per cohort comes inside. So the same thing that we used to have with guys like AppsFlyer or Kochava. They've always been tracking IAP revenues per user cohort for us. So the same applies to ad revenues now. We didn't have a chance to attribute ad revenues, but it comes inside. It gets real right now. So here's a comparison chart of all the major ad formats that we see right now on the market. And from this spreadsheet, you can see that even though most of the ad networks, they advertise heavily rewarded videos as well as natives, according to this spreadsheet, it's not there yet. So what we as a publisher, what we really care about is not eCPM or fill rates or all these buzzwords. What we actually care about is revenue. And this is how we should compare ad formats between each other. So ARPDAU is essentially revenue that you are making per daily active user. As you can see, according to the spreadsheet, these numbers are pulled from our internal data. So according to this spreadsheet, average revenue per daily active users is much higher on the interstitial side rather than rewarded video or any other format. The reason it happens is because on average, you can display less than one impression of rewarded video per session, right? But at the same time, you can display about 22 banners per session. So because of this volume is so much different from rewarded videos, actual amounts of money you can make from old formats like banners and interstitials is still the highest on interstitials and banners. Nevertheless, interstitials and banners have very negative effects on the retention rates of your audience base. So general recommendations would be like this. If you don't do any in-app purchases in your game and you rely primarily on ads to monetize game, you go with interstitials or banners. You typically want to go with banners if your average session is long enough, if it's longer than several minutes. If you have like 3 or 4 minutes of average session, then you should definitely go with banners, since the amount of banners you can show is so much higher. And then if you go with in-app purchases, I suggest that you support it with rewarded videos. So here's a little bit deeper view on all the formats that we have here. So like I said, interstitials remain accountable for the majority of ad revenues from casual games. It has the highest ARPDAU. It has decent eCPMs, and in many cases it can compete with rewarded videos eCPM. And the reason it happens is because we still have a lot of branding advertisers flowing towards this formats. So brands and media, they're extremely slow adopting new formats. And I'm sure you all know that we don't see much of Coca-Cola and Macy's advertising with rewarded videos. They're still not there yet. They're still spending their money on banners and interstitials. The other thing is that interstitials are mostly programmatic by this moment, which essentially means that advertisers can spend their money more efficiently, and thus they can spend more money in general on interstitials. But like I said, it's a most annoying format. Nobody likes interstitials much, so and your users are going to hate you for that. So you need to find the balance between annoying your users and making some money. Core ad networks that support interstitials at this point are AdMob, MoPub, Startup, Facebook, and MyTarget. Those 5 are really good in terms of supporting interstitial model. Pretty much the same thing applies to banners. So it's an outdated format, really, right? So nobody really likes it much. If you're on the advertiser side, then you don't like banners really too much because they do not convert well. However, if you're on the publisher side, this must be one of your favorite formats. The reason is because media continue to spend budgets there on these formats, and they don't really care much about the conversions, but they keep blindly spending their money there. So if you're a game developer, if you're a publisher, and if you want to generate some revenue out of your game, banners remain a great format for you. And same applies to banners, right? We have a strong development of programmatic support there, and it's an excellent option if your game has a long session, like 3 or 4 minutes or more than that. Not too many ad networks remain active here in this field, but AdMob remains a leading platform. Amazon /A9 is doing very well on the banners, especially in Tier 1 countries. Interactive and MoPub are doing really well on the programmatic side. Video interstitials are not worthy enough to integrate them without any other support, because primarily all the video ad networks, they source their demand from CPI advertisers, primarily other games. And in many cases, they simply cannot compete efficiently against brands in media that spend money on interstitials. So in many cases, interstitials produce higher money than video interstitials. Typically, you want to find the balance between showing interstitials and video interstitials with a slight shift towards interstitials, static interstitials. Now, that doesn't apply to rewarded videos, though. Those are skippable videos. As you can see, we see about the same companies that support video interstitials that do work in rewarded videos section. Appodeal, MoPub, Vangel, Unity Ads, and Ad Colony should be here as well. So now, rewarded video is a great blooming format. Especially great if you are into hardcore gaming. If you do a lot of in-app purchases, then you definitely should support your model with rewarded videos, because it is a well-known fact that only 1% of your audience will actually spend money with you, right? But 99% of the audience will just stop playing your game if they are forced to spend some money with you. So it has a positive effect on the retention rate, because in many cases it helps to re-engage user and even increase the length of the session. It provides great eCPM. The problem with rewarded videos is that it's extremely hard to achieve to display it at a high scale, right? On average, it works only if you do 1 or 2 impressions per session. If you do more than that, then eCPMs plummet down and it's not worth it for you anymore. So that's why it's a good alternative and a support, but not a good format. That's just to use without anything else. AppLovin, Unity Ads, Chartboost, Vangel, Ad Colony, and MoPub. Those 6 would be major players in this field according to our internal data. Most of these guys are non-programmatic yet, except for Mopop and Vangel to a certain degree. And native ads. Native ads is blooming, and it's a good alternative to banners. Like I said, if you are into utilities or some other apps that can benefit from implementing a custom ad format, then native ads is definitely for you. Cheetah Mobile has been extremely successful, and in fact, I think they're the most successful publisher right now, and they that rely on ad monetization stack, and they do exclusively native ads right now. Cheetah Mobile, it's a Chinese developer that made piano tiles. According to Facebook research, native ads provide on average 30 to 200% CPM improvement in comparison to banners. But always keep in mind that it's not only about the CPM, it's about ARPDAU. Facebook is leading efforts in scaling up native ads. My targets: Eva, Carrot, Pub Native, Flurry, Mopop, and Startup. We find all these guys pretty efficient in the native field. Yeah, so that's about it. Wanted to share some insights here with you as a bonus here. So we made this internal research at Appodeal, and we found out that actually there are a lot of factors that influence the amount of money you make with ads. Like for instance, on Android, it turns out that you get so much more money with Samsung devices rather than Sony or Lenovo. Same applies to the battery states. It turns out that the lower the battery state is, the higher conversion rate is, meaning that you get more money when the device of your publisher runs out of charge. Obviously, it applies to connection type. 3G connections typically pay less than Wi-Fi connections. And day of the week has a huge impact on the cost of the advertisements. Typically, we see the most expensive ads flowing in on Saturdays and Sundays, and Monday is always the worst from the publisher point of view. And hours of the day also affects the conversion rate and the cost of advertisements a lot. Typically, there is not much conversions late at night, at like 3 or 4 in the morning, but the highest conversion rate is achieved at like 6 to 9 p.m., right after people go home from work. So yeah, just wanted to sum it up really quick that interstitials and banners remain accountable for the majority of casual, not hardcore, but casual mobile game ad revenues. Native ads will be adopted by publishers to improve retention rates and monetize non-paying users. Videos remain a good alternative to, sorry, not alternative, but a good support to IAP model. But always, it is always good in mind that ARPDAU is the real metric you want to assess, not eCPM. Programmatic native and video will continue to bloom, bring in more traditional advertisers, branding advertisers and ad networks into space. Ad revenue attribution per cohort becomes especially useful for publishers who tend to calculate their lifetime values. And traditional waterfall model is being replaced by flat waterfall model, also known as auction-based mediation. Yeah, so that's about it. Happy to answer your questions if there are any.
Yeah, I just had a question about a couple of those metrics you laid up there at the end. You mentioned battery life and things like that. Those aren't really targetable attributes yet, are they? Those are just statistics you picked up. Meaning if I wanted to target low battery life devices, I can't really do that at this point.
You can target them as an advertiser. And like I said, all of that applies to the publisher. It doesn't really apply to the advertiser. As a publisher, you want to be flexible about your strategy of displaying ads within your game. Typically, it doesn't make sense to display any ads within your game at 4 a.m. in the morning. Even if you have people playing it, they're simply not going to convert. Same applies to the battery state. If the battery is full of charge, you don't want to display ads to this user because they're not going to pay. Users tend to click and convert only when their battery is running out of charge, according to our internal stats. And like I said, we do about 7.5 billion impressions a month. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Really appreciate it, and I hope it was helpful.
Thanks, Pavel.